I am Moutiou Adjibi Nourou from Agence Ecofin, Côte d'Ivoire. Okay. My first question will be about inflation in Africa. You have encouraged central banks to continue tightening their monetary policies to fight inflation. Yet, in Africa, inflation seems to be mainly imported. So, although there have been a slight decline in the rate of inflation, don't you think that the raising policy rates is an outdated solution for in the context of our region?
Thank you so much. So on inflation, on the inflation challenge, again, this tends to be, of course, unless you're part of a monetary union, there's a lot of variation in inflation and also a country-specific assessment that has to be done on the causes of inflation. So yes, to a significant degree, we've seen imported, the pressure on inflation has been imported. So if you're in oil importing countries, you're facing higher international oil prices, right? And depending on the extent to which it's being passed on, that's a source of inflation. Similarly, food prices having been elevated after Russia's invasion of Ukraine, that also is a channel through which inflation has risen. But, as we look across the region, there are also countries where clearly it's domestic demand pressure or monetary policy having been loose in the recent past that is causing inflation. So, I think you have to look at the totality of those factors. But, increasingly, I think what we cannot say is, things like interest rates do not work, raising interest rates do not work. I mean, of course they do, because, that's the standard monetary policy response, and our economies are now, more so than in the past, I would say, a lot more influenced by, the normal way in which monetary policy.
The second question. A few days ago, 8 OPEC countries announced drastic cuts in their oil production. Given that the many countries of the region are oil producers, including Nigeria, what impact do you anticipate this decision will have in the short term and on the economic revenues of the Subsaharian African countries? Thank you.
Influenced by, the normal way in which monetary policy transmission works. So I think, raising interest rates is part of the answer to addressing inflation. But again, how you calibrate that depends on country-specific circumstances. OPEC oil price increase, as always in Sub-Saharan Africa, it will be asymmetric. In general, it will be negative because, I think out of the 45 countries, only about 8 are net oil exporters. So those other things being equal, whether you have subsidy or not, etc., should benefit from higher oil prices. But for most other countries, it will be a source of, a negative shock. So it will amplify imports, foreign exchange demand, and at the margin also inflation.